I'm Eva, and I would like to welcome you to another episode of The Charm of It, a podcast for knitters who share my fascination with the nitty-gritty details of our craft. If you are a new viewer, I'm so glad that you found your way to my little corner of the internet. I record two different kinds of podcasts, and today is a progress snapshot, which means I will only be talking about my works in progress, which doesn't seem to mean it ends up any shorter. The other kind includes finished objects and more kind of knitter or fiber-related segments. Let's see, I'm trying out a new lens today because it seems that the focusing stuff is messed up again, and also my chronic illnesses are flaring up a bit, so this lens should make it so that I don't have to reach so far for you guys to be able to see the details on the knitting. The downside is the camera is much further than me, so hopefully the sound will still be good, and I can't actually see as well what's in focus, so bear with me. It would be so nice if technology just took care of itself. This is my co-host Moth, my cat, and this one, my dog, is right beside me. You can just see her ears there. And if you're a returning viewer, of course, it is wonderful to see you again. I'm so glad that you want to catch up with what I've been knitting. And I think that that's everything. I'm drinking apple cider today because I had to pick some up at the grocery store anyway for a butternut squash soup recipe that I make, so I got the half gallon so I could just drink some. And I am wearing my Beekeeper's Apprentice cardigan, which was knit using the Honeybee cardigan pattern and with Quince & Company Sparrow yarn, which is their 100% organic linen, in one of the gray colorways, Birch. I'm really hoping you can't hear. There's one house in my entire neighborhood that is rented out to college students, and so there's like 10 frat boys, essentially, living a few buildings down, and just as I had set up to record, they came out to, I don't know, frolic in the sunshine, whatever frat boys do. So hopefully I closed all the windows. That won't get too bad, but let's get on to the knitting. Let's see, I guess I'll show you something you've seen before first. I've got 4 works in progress to share with you. I know, Moth, I should just pet you instead. So this is the Kalinka Dress. I don't think I mentioned its name last time, so there's this really fun Russian song that I learned when I was studying abroad there. One of the classes was folk songs. And it's called Kalinka, which is, I guess, Little Red Berry, but that Inca makes it a kind of cute, sweet kind of ending, if that makes sense. So I really enjoy that song, and since this is a red dress, I just thought I would go with that as the name. So, you probably know the song. Even, like, if you know a Russian song, it's going to be that one. It starts out, Kalinka, Kalinka, Kalinka Maya, Saduyagra, Malinka, Malinka Maya. And then it just gets faster. Hey, Kalinka, Kalinka, Kalinka Maya, Saduyagra, Malinka, Malinka Maya. Hey! So like that. Hopefully my singing was not too atrocious. As you can see, I have finished the bodice. I've got 2 front pieces and a back piece, and they are 3 needle bound off together at the shoulders, but I have not yet seamed up the sides. I plan to do that. I finished up the back piece at night, and I don't like seaming at night because it's harder to see what I'm doing. So, yeah, that is why it's not seamed up yet. I'm sure I'll do that soon. Because I am playing, maybe not yarn chicken, but because I'm not sure how far the yardage is going to go of this main color, I have a little less than 1,500 yards. And the dress pattern I'm using is for children, so I can't just go by what her yardage is. And so because of that, I've decided to knit the entire bodice, including the edging on the sleeves and the neck and the button band in the front. And then I'm going to knit the skirt top down, and the skirt has a big hem or band of color work. So if I run out of yarn early, it won't matter because I can just do color work. So that is why I started with that. And here, I'll hold up. I'm actually going to make it reversible. So here is where you can see the back is lower than I would usually do a back. but it's that way I can wear it either way with the buttons on the front or the back once the cardigan is on. The dress pattern, which is written for little girls, the buttons go on the back. But I like having options. And I used the Skype rib stitch pattern, which hopefully the camera is focusing so that you can see, which is a really pretty decorative ribbing. And I used that, it's from a sock pattern, and it's really simple, and it's just a 3-stitch repeat, so it was pretty easy to increase in pattern. And I really just liked how it looked, and I think it'll make for a really nicely fitting bodice. The yarn, before I get into a little more detail, is October House Fiber Arts, which is she's an independent dyer, and it's in the Muscadine colorway, which is this really beautiful plum. And it is the Arbor fingering base, which is 100% BFL, and there are 490 yards to 100 grams, so it's a pretty fine fingering. However, she no longer carries this base. I think now all of her yarns are superwash, so that's a shame. But I could be wrong about that. There might be one or two that aren't superwash, but they're also heavier weight yarn, and I'm mainly interested in fingering. But yeah, so I got 3 skeins of this for Christmas a couple years ago. And originally I planned to knit it into a cardigan, but this past winter I discovered that I've become much more sensitive to BFL and just various yarn fibers in general. So, and since my sensitivity a lot of times is along my arms, and it's really difficult for me to find long-sleeved blouses to wear under cardigans, I decided that a sleeveless dress would be perfect, because then I can wear whatever length sleeve I want under the dress, and the yarn won't be quite touching me. And then the BFL, since it's such a nice drapey breed of sheep, will make for a really nice skirt, hopefully, so we'll see. The details I wanted to mention was, so I finished these front pieces, and they looked awfully small, even for ribbing. So I kind of put them up against me and stretched them out, and they had to be quite stretchy. And so I rechecked my gauge swatch, and instead of 7 stitches to the inch, I was getting 7.3. So that was affecting my gauge a little. And then, of course, ribbing draws in, and I wasn't really sure how much I wanted the ribbing to pull, especially since I'll be wearing something under this, so I don't want it to show. Although it doesn't seem like it's showing through. There we go. There it is stretched. Yeah, it's not showing through. Anyway, so for the front pieces, that's not a huge deal because I can always make the button band wider than I had originally planned. But for the back piece, I decided to err on the side of wider. So I cast on more stitches, and it stretches really far, so I think once I seam it up, I'll find that I can do the narrow button band that I had originally planned, and the wider back will compensate a little for the front. So the side seam might end up a little more towards the front, but not enough for it to really matter. Here you can kind of see what it'll look like on. I did bind off in a few stages for the crew neck, and once I pick up the stitches and knit the neckband, this will be round. I'm not going to leave it square. I felt that that would be a little too costumey, considering this is going to be like a fit and flare dress anyway, which is more traditional looking versus contemporary styles. Although there is a really strong vintage trend in contemporary styles right now. Anyway, I like the round neck, so that'll be a round neckband. I'm trying to decide right now whether to do it in garter, which is what the pattern calls for, or do it in a seed or moss stitch, because garter eats more yarn, just because, you know, the rows are kind of compressed a lot. And garter and moss gets a really nice texture but doesn't eat yarn, so I'll probably do that. And you can see, since it's going to be sleeveless, I'll also have a band right here. And I do quite a narrow band when I am knitting a sleeveless garment. I've knit 2 vests, although you've only seen one of them. The other one I still need to finish. Anyway, and now this sleeveless dress, and I always end up binding off more stitches than Ann Budd's pattern calls for. I use her vest pattern from Knitter's Handy Book of Patterns, there we go, for a lot of the numbers, but I bind off extra stitches at the armhole shaping because I prefer a fairly narrow strap, and since you add a neckband to this side and, you know, like a finishing band to this side, if this band is wider, then once you add the finishing touch, you're like out to here, and I just prefer to have it sitting inwards towards my shoulder. So I believe those are all the details I need to talk about. I know I talked in detail about how I was managing the waist shaping in the front pieces on my last project Snapshot, and I did the back the same way. So there you have it, and I guess not really the back since it's going to be reversible, but it's just simpler to call it that way. Not sure if I'll get to seam that up today or not. My dad is coming into town this weekend, and so, you know, you have to get the apartment guest ready. And next up we have Friyay Mitts, which are not for me. You might be able to guess that by this colorway, which I think is really fun and cheerful. One of my really good friends here asked if I could knit her some mitts because she used to have a pair that her mother had made her, but they had either gotten lost or messed up or something. And we follow each other on Instagram, and she saw my moth mitts and asked if I could make her a pair just of mitts. And I said, of course. So when we went to the Finger Lakes Fiber Festival, me and two other friends, a few weekends ago, and this friend picked out some yarn. She's not a knitter, she does crochet blankets. She picked out some yarn for the mitts, and this is the yarn that she picked out. It is from Fleece Artist, and the colorway is Painted Bunting. It's fingering weight, and it's a single ply merino. I can't remember what the name of that base is, and it's superwash. And so I sent her links to various mitt patterns, and since the yarn has so many colors in it, we decided to keep it simple, and she picked the HG mitts, which I've knit myself a pair of as well. And I really like them. They just have a little bit of decorative lace here at the bottom. And then I did make one modification. The pattern has you doing columns of garter stitch or seed stitch, but it's one stitch, so I'm never sure what to call that. And because this is such a fun variegated yarn, I decided to do my columns as slip stitches instead, so that you're really playing with those colors. And I did warn my friend before she bought the yarn that there was the potential that it would pool, and she said that that was okay with her. The main part of the mitt is knit on 60 stitches, and that did a remarkably good job of not pooling. It pulled a little down in the lace section, which was also 60 stitches, so that's weird. But the main part was almost striping, basically. And then once I started increasing for that thumb gusset, you can see there's a little bit of pooling right there, but it's really not too bad. Usually when I knit mitts, I put the thumb gusset a little in towards the palm, not directly on the side seam. But in this case, I decided to leave it straight on the side seam so that she can wear the mitts with either side up, if that makes sense. Because I wasn't really sure if the colors were going to look the same all the way around, and this way she can just decide. So they'll be fully reversible, basically. And I'm almost done with the first mitt. I have finished the body, and now I just need to work this lace pattern again, and then 5 rounds of 1x1 twisted rib. So that has gone by really quickly because I can knit it while I'm reading. And I did my favorite tubular cast on, not bind off, cast on for this part of the cuff. You can see the waist yarn, and I always use Tech Knitter's directions because I find them really simple and easy. So yeah, she really loves how they're turning out too, which is the important thing. And I should have those done within another few days. I cast on, not yesterday, the day before yesterday, so. Next up is another garment project. Oh, I should say now that you won't be seeing the Songbird cardigan today. That's that colorwork sweater that I was doing. I decided to put it in hibernation for now. I actually did figure out what I'm going to do with the back pieces, and I swatched it and everything, and it's going to work. However, I don't really like having 3 garments on the needles at once. I learned that when I tried it for the first time in April. And so since I have 2 other garments that are both more time sensitive, I decided to go ahead and put the Songbird sweater in hibernation, and I will pull it out probably in November. Oh, I forgot to say that the Kalinka Dress is part of Mars's Slog Along from Hey Brownberry. That's her Instagram. I think she's changed that to be her podcast too, but she's doing basically a craft along for like big projects or things with lots of bits that you're not sure you're going to enjoy. So I thought that the big stockinette skirt would be perfect for that. And that runs until November 30th. It would be really nice if I had the dress finished by then because it would make such a lovely Christmas dress, but we will see. Okay, so this cardigan is the Marzipan Cardigan, and I'm working on the second front right now. So here is the first front. Let's see. And there's that really pretty lace pattern. I forgot to say, you guys are always welcome to leave any kind of feedback about technical stuff. It won't hurt my feelings if things are causing problems, and I will do the best I can to fix it. And you can just leave that in a comment on YouTube. You don't have to contact me privately. It doesn't hurt my feelings. Okay, so this sweater is something that I've had planned for quite a while because I knit the pointelle pattern from Cookie A, which is a sock pattern, and I knit it as socks maybe 2 years ago, and I knit it with Quince & Company Finchon. I never know how to pronounce this, if it's Audouin, which I think would be the French way, but then I heard another podcaster say it in a way that sounded much more Englishy, and now I can't remember what she calls it. Odin? Odwin? It's O-U-D-O-I-N. Way too many vowels. But it's the same, it's also a very natural, it's undyed, and it's heathered. And I so loved how this pattern looked in that yarn that I felt it needed to be adapted into a cardigan. But of course, it took a while to actually get there. So that has been in the back of my mind as something that I would do. Then I received an incredibly generous gift card for my birthday to Elsa Wool, which is one of my very favorite yarn companies. And she sells 100% Cormo yarn in all these different variations, from woolen to worsted spun, all different weights, and all different shades of sheep. She doesn't sell any colored yarn. It's all natural, not unnatural. Undyed. There we go. And that just seemed like the perfect opportunity because I already know that I love sweaters knit out of her yarn. This will be the third one for me. And I've knit one in sport weight, one in fingering weight, and now I'm trying out the lace weight. I prefer her woolen spun yarn. And I have found that when I'm working with woolen spun yarn, I tend to knit it up at a gauge that matches one size higher. And this is quite a thick lace weight to begin with. It's 350 yards to 50 grams. So basically I'm knitting it up at a fingering weight gauge. The fingering weight Elsa Wool cardigan that I knitted at a sport gauge. And then the sport weight one I was cabling, so that's a different story. So I'm really curious about whether I should use the fingering or lace weight of hers in future sweaters. So it's really nice to be able to compare. And this is the light gray option. I think it's 10% dark and then 90% white. And it's absolutely beautiful. I love this color. This works better on me than completely natural, which tends to be a little warm for my coloring. And I pretty much want to knit everything in this shade. I already have a hat and mittens with it, but that is clearly not enough. So, the thing about the pointelle pattern, actually, I should have gotten one of the socks. 1 minute. The thing about the pointelle sock pattern is that, look how matchy-matchy I'm going to be. Hurrah! Okay. Is that it spirals. So, as you can see, each of these spiral around. And so the chart, if you follow the chart exactly, if you were just to knit that flat instead of in the round. Sorry, something's vibrating and I don't know what. I bet it's my upstairs neighbor, because it's not my phone. Okay. Lots of distractions today. So if you were to follow this chart and knit it flat rather than in the round, the beginning of round marker is constantly moving. If you were to knit it flat, instead of having a rectangular piece of fabric, you would have a parallelogram because it's knit on the bias. So I had to figure out a way to make this design work and still stay fairly rectangular, you know, cardigan shaped, because I am not a parallelogram. And that was exciting. So I knit the waistband, and I did something similar to what I did for my last sweater, the Audrey and Unst pattern that I made, the Country Mouse cardigan, which was also an Elsa wool. Only I did 3 inches instead of 4 inches because I didn't want the ribbing to be like the star of the show. Then I did this lace right here. So the sock is knit top down, and I briefly considered knitting my sweater top down so that the lace would be the same, but I decided I liked the lace both ways, so I might as well make it easier on myself and knit it bottom up since that's the way I'm most familiar with. So I knit this section of lace, which is not on the bias, so that's really easy. And then I started trying to adapt the chart. And this looks really good, if I do say so myself. And it looks a lot like the socks. It looks like it would, you know, happen pretty automatically. This is the 12th try. There came a point when I was thinking about throwing in the towel and thinking that I had just overestimated my own knitting skills and that this just was not going to happen in the way that I wanted it to. But luckily, I decided to keep sticking with it, partly because this is the big project in the owl proposal that I made for the Harry Potter house cap. You can hear more about that on my last episode, or just look at it on Ravelry. But essentially, it's advanced independent study projects. So I'm doing one on lace. So that helped get me through that, and the fact that I really wanted this sweater. So I tried various approaches to how to get this to happen, and I posted about it on Instagram, and it was really interesting because when I finally found this solution, it seemed so simple and obvious and natural that I couldn't understand why I hadn't seen it before. And in my experience, that usually means that you finally have found the right answer, because I do that when I'm designing with color work too, where I'll try to get these colors to go together and they're not working and they're not working, and finally a swatch works, and then it just seems like it was always meant to be, and why would you ever try it a different way? So I can't tell you why I tried it so many other different ways. But yeah, because I was knitting and ripping, and it's not like I knit the whole thing and ripped it out each time. I kind of got a little further up each time. It was the 11th time I had finally gotten this stuff sorted out, but I only had 1 line running across instead of 3, and I got up to here before I realized that I really would prefer the 3. So that was hard because I had to rip all the way back down. But it was worth it. I decided that my new knitting motto is when in doubt, rip it out, because I'm always happier when I take that time to reknit it. And because I was trying so many different things, instead of taking a lot of written notes, I was using my stitch markers as my notes, basically. So they're marking the waist shaping, because I really think I should just call it bust shaping. So I was increasing as I went up, and then they also mark where this leaf pattern starts, so that I can match up, and then this one marks where I did the armhole bind off. And because I did that, I have been able to work the second piece. I did have a few confusions in the beginning because, you know, it's mirrored. And so my brain had gotten used to thinking in one direction, and then I was having to think in another direction. But after the initial few rounds, I had it sorted out. So I have finished the 4th bust increase out of 5. So I am here. And things are moving much more simply once you actually have a plan and don't have to be guessing everything. So yeah, I think I cast on for this earlier in the week. So I'm knitting it at a little more than 7 stitches to the inch on size 1 needles. I did swatch on size 0s, but the gauge swatch was just a little too firm. And here, oh no, I've got one of my swatches. Here's the other one. So here are my 2 swatches. You can see I do pretty small swatches now as far as height goes. That's because I used to do 6" by 6" swatches, and I would measure my row gauge from them, and then my row gauge in the finished object was always different. So I've just decided that I can't measure row gauge in a swatch. So I cast on for about 6 inches worth, plus 2 stitches on either side for garter stitch, and then I just knit a fair amount. And so here are my 2 swatches, and you can see that I tried 2 different ways of positioning that lace chart. Well, I don't know if you can see. Hopefully you can see that. And so that way I could decide which way I liked best before I was working on the front piece. I thought about trying to sort out all of the questions about shaping and that kind of thing in a swatch, but front pieces are fairly small, and because of the way this works, where everything's interacting together, I just didn't think I could get a sense of what was going to happen from a swatch versus just knitting it as a whole. I'm really delighted with how this turned out, and I'm glad that I persevered. It's definitely a challenge. The funny part is that the challenge was not where I expected. So I expected the challenge to be trying to figure out where to do the bust increases, because in addition to doing them on the side, I like to put them in the middle too, princess seam style, and I didn't want to disrupt the pattern, and so I wasn't really sure how that was going to work out. But it turned out that that was really simple. I did the early ones in these columns of stockinette, and you can't even really tell the ones where I've increased. Like, it looks very natural. And then I did the later ones in these columns of stockinette. So it turned out to be quite easy to increase in pattern. I did have to start with a pretty high stitch count down here. That's why there aren't more increases, just because this stitch repeat is a 10 count repeat. So that doesn't give you a ton of wiggle room. So this will be kind of a blousey sweater from the waistband out. But I really quite like that look, so it's not a huge deal to me. For the band, as I said, I did the same thing that I did on my Country Mouse cardigan. So I started this ribbing one size up compared to the body. Then I did the body needle, and then I did 2 sizes down. Actually 3, because my only double zeros are with these steel DPNs that I really don't like. So I did the triple zeros, which are Addy Turbo Lace circulars. And so that won't be stretching out. I think I'm going to do a sleeve next. And the sleeves, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to do this lace pattern and then the spiral just all the way around. I'm not going to do the contrast spiral or the contrast lace because the sleeve will start being attached here. It's going to be a set-in sleeve. So I think having the spiral going all the way will just be more interesting. Kind of funny because the sleeves I'm going to knit in the round, so those are the parts that would have been easier to adapt from the sock. But yeah, so basically the sleeve will look kind of like that. These poor socks did not like going through my mother's front-loading washing machine when I was home last Christmas. It's the closest I've come to felting socks. And they're not felted, but they're definitely closer to being felted than they were before then. All I can think, because usually I just wash everything on cold only, and my basement's machines, or my apartment building's machines, are the top-loading agitator kind, which, if anything were going to felt, you'd think it would be that. So all I can think is that I put the wrong setting on when I was doing the laundry and must have done one that was warm-cold instead of cold-cold. They still fit, though. And those are knit out of Quince & Company Finch yarn, which is not a super washable. But all my other pairs of Finch socks that have only gone through my ancient top-loading agitator machine in the basement are perfectly fine. They look the same as when I knit them. So I really like being able to wash my socks in the machine and then air dry them, as opposed to having to dump them all in a sink and then agitate it around myself. Back to sweaters. So yeah, I think I'm going to do the sleeves next and then do the back. So in my head, the back would be simple because I'm just doing the front twice. And this is the same issue that I ran into with that songbird cardigan, is that actually you're not doing the front twice because there's no button band and there's no split. So in this case, I have to figure out what I'm going to do in the center. So the back will look like that, right? And this lace is going to grow out of the middle, but I haven't decided yet whether I just want them to meet up like this, or whether I should do some kind of, I don't know, column up the middle that everything can grow out of. I don't know. Let me know if you have an opinion. I would absolutely love to hear it. So that's why I decided I would just make it easy on myself and do the sleeves next. So I have 4 skeins of yarn, and I would say I'm maybe halfway through the first one. So it seems like this yarn is going to go nice and far. It would be wonderful if I could get a sweater out of 3 skeins of this, because it's, I think, $10 to $12 a skein, depending on what color you get. So considering this is one of my favorite sweater yarns ever, and I find it very luxurious, that would be an incredible deal for a sweater. One more. The other part of my owl proposal for lace studying was a cowl. And this is how much I have done. I'm calling this our Victorian grandmother's cowl, and that is because of the description Barbara Walker uses for this first lace stitch, which is the porcupine lace stitch pattern, which is in her second treasury of knitted stitches. I will go get that so I can read it to you. So unprepared today. This unusual pattern is mid-Victorian or earlier and was used for shawls, scarves, and those unique articles of headgear that our grandmothers called clouds. Having an odd number of rows, the pattern is therefore reversible. So I love the little annotations Barbara Walker includes with some of the stitches. It's one of the things that I really enjoy about flipping through these stitch dictionaries. And that just really tickled me. So I decided that that is what I would name the cowl for. And this stitch is crazy. Part of why I decided to knit this cowl and the cardigan together for the owl project was because they offer such a contrast in lace knitting, because the cardigan is very kind of, you know, you're almost drawing with yarn overs, whereas this is much more textural. And this lace pattern is the least intuitive thing I've ever seen. Like, usually you can tell after you've knit for a while where the yarn overs are going to end up, and you can kind of see if you've made a mistake while you're knitting. You don't have to wait till the end of the row and discover your stitch count is off. But this one, it just seems completely random. It took a really long time for me to be like, oh yeah, I do like how it looks. I liked how it looked in the book, her little demonstration photo, but it was definitely a thing of faith. And I've included on the project page the link to the Knitting Fool description of porcupine stitch so that you can see how it works yourself. It switches the right side and wrong side switch on row 7, essentially. So each side ends up looking the same. And because I'm knitting a cowl, that's really important to me because I don't want to have to worry. I like my cowls to be double looped, and that way I don't have to worry about the loop turning inside out. So half of the cowl is going to be knit in this stitch, and then the other half, and I've got, I think, about 8 inches left to go, 6 or 8. The other half is going to be knit in another reversible lace stitch, which is the Grand Trefoil, I don't know, trefoil, I don't know how you pronounce these words. This is the bad part about learning a lot of your vocabulary from reading. Grand starts with G, not T. Let's see, 263. And this is also linked on the project page, so you'll be able to see how it works. But it is basically a kind of mesh. Hopefully you saw that because I can't hold that book up anymore. It's really heavy. And I do have a swatch, actually. Here's my swatch so that you can see them both. And you can see how weird the porcupine stitch looks before you've done more. So stitches, but the top is the other stitch, the Grand Trefoil, and it's much more open and lacy and eyelet-y, so I think that it'll look really interesting when I'm wearing it as a loop and these two stitches are wrapped up between each other. That's the idea anyway. And it's also reversible. I am going to go down a needle size, and I might have to adjust my stitch count for this one because it's so much more open than the porcupine stitch, but we will get to that when we get to it. This yarn is Blue Moon Fiber Arts BFL Sport. BFL stands for Blue Face Luster. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier with the Kalinka Dress. And Blue Face Luster is just a particular breed of sheep, which I really enjoy working with. Okay. In the PDX Rose City colorway, Blue Moon Fiber Arts is a quite large independent dyer based in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. Portland? Seattle? One of the two. And they offer all kinds of really interesting bases, as well as really beautiful tonal colors. This is one of my favorite pinks. And I got this off D-Stash, and then I knit it into a sweater, and I loved this sweater. I wore it a lot. It was based on an Alice Starmore pattern, but I had done some substitutions. And it's even what I'm wearing like in my Instagram profile photo, because I really loved it. And then this past winter, I couldn't wear it because my skin found it too itchy. And I was kind of in denial and tried to wear it anyway, but it just really wasn't working. So I decided that rather than, lecture my skin or suffer itching in order to wear this, that both seemed ridiculous to me. Instead, I would just reclaim the yarn and knit it into a cowl because my neck is not nearly so sensitive as both my arms and then my back. So, I have unraveled the sleeves. I think they're playing beer pong. I've unraveled the sleeves, and that got me this far into the cowl, a little less than halfway. And now it is time for me to unravel the body. I just haven't done it yet. So I haven't worked on this in a few days, just because I haven't bothered to frog the body. I've been reclaiming quite a bit of yarn, and I guess I haven't talked about how I do it. So all I do is I am on the couch, and I've got my Swift set up next to me on the coffee table. And it's I think it's called the Amish style. And I find the end, and I pull out where the end is. And once I have started unraveling, I tie the end to my Swift, and then I just push the Swift so that it's turning around. And that unravels the yarn. And then at the end of that, I'm left with a skein that's quite wavy. So I tie it off I usually try to do 6 spots now. I used to do 4, and then I would have some problems later. So I tie it off in 6 spots, then I soak it in the sink with wool wash and warm water. And I leave it to soak, depending, with things like this where it's a sweater that I've worn a lot, and that has gone through multiple, blockings while being a sweater. I usually leave it to soak for at least 2 hours, maybe more, until the yarn starts to straighten out. Then I pull it out, and if it's still not straight, I kind of pop it, and then I quack it a little, the way you would do with hand spinning. I get as much of the water out as I can. The sun is arriving, anyway. And so far I haven't had anything felt on me. And then once it's looking pretty straight, I hang it up from a clothes hanger on my shower rod to dry. So that is how I reclaim yarn. And yeah, so pretty straight. So I'm really excited to be able to wear this, and it's pretty fun because the 3 projects that I'm working on for me right now all go together very nicely. And I could actually all wear them in the same outfit if I wanted to, because it's a cowl, a dress, and a cardigan, a sleeveless dress. So it's always nice to me when my things match. That is everything that I have for you this episode. And I'm knitting the cowl on my double points that I've just made into mini straights by putting a needle protector on. I always forget to mention that, but it has worked really well. I really like not having to fiddle with a cable when I'm doing back and forth knitting. It's made me, if this company still sold wooden needles, it's the Diet Craft. and they had like 10-inch straights, I would probably buy a full set of those for sweater knitting, because since I knit so many things flat these days, I don't know, I'm just rethinking that. Oh, and then the other thing that I've been contemplating as I frogged this sweater, which was one of the first ones that I knit, I used to knit everything at a much looser gauge. Well, my very first sweater, first two, I knit at a very tight, firm gauge, and I didn't really like that. So then the next two, I knit at quite a loose gauge. Like, I'm knitting this cowl at a firmer gauge than I did the sweater. And both of those were pullovers, not cardigans. And I knit them both with significant negative ease, and they looked really good. So when I was talking last time about adding more positive ease and wondering why I got so tight, I think that that might be another part of that puzzle too, because, and it wasn't a conscious choice, but I've somehow drifted into knitting my sweaters at a much firmer gauge than I did with these two. And I think that once you're making a firmer fabric, if you try to do the negative ease thing, that's when you start running into more problems, because the fabric doesn't have as much give, and so it's not as interested in accommodating your curves. And it would prefer to smush them. And of course, there's the difference between cardigans and jumpers as well. But even my first Quince & Company turn sweater, I knit at about 6 stitches to the inch. And the second, I knit at 8 stitches to the inch. And I really think, I don't know, obviously I knit it with different stitch patterns and that kind of thing, but I think that I might have erred too much on knitting things more firmly than I needed to, so I need to find a happy medium. I think my next turn sweater I will knit at 7 stitches to the inch and see how that works out. And that's kind of what I did with my Marzipan cardigan. When I swatched on zeros, and the fabric was good, but when I swatched them once, I just really liked that extra drape to it. So I think I need to get into the habit of swatching on 2 to 3 needle sizes as well, which I know some people do as a matter of course, and I tend not to, but it really is interesting to be able to compare and contrast them and kind of find that happy medium between the kind of movement that you want in a sweater, but also not so loose that it's going to pill really quickly. So just some random musings towards the end. And I hope that you enjoyed the episode. I look forward to, fluff. I am always so grateful that you watch and comment and talk to me. I'm on Instagram, and Ravelry is the charm of it, and also here on YouTube. I love getting comments. And I will wake up my 2 little buddies. Here we go. So goodbye from Moth, Thistle, and me, and hopefully we're a little bit in focus regardless of the sun. And I will see you again soon. Hello. Did I wake you up? Oh, I'm sorry.